Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Holly Echohawk, and we'll do introductions of the panelists and everyone in a minute here, but we always like to start with something incredibly positive, and we're going to start with one of my favorite Native videos. So we're going to listen to a short video first, and then they'll come back to me. So I hope you enjoy it.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why is there innocent people locked up for life? While some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Why?
So I hope you all enjoy a little joy from Christian. Christian Takes the Gun Parish is known professionally as Superman. Many of you might know him. If not, I would encourage you to know him. He's one of my most favorite folks, and I really enjoyed the song that he wrote and performed called Why. And also to give recognition to Akosia Red Elk, who's a champion jingle dress dancer from Umatilla, who taught herself how to dance when she was 16 years old and is a world Indian country world champion jingle dress dancer. Christian or Superman, I had the pleasure of spending a couple of days with him talking about mental health and emotional wellness, which is a better phrase for me to use. Like many of us, he came from a trauma background, and he has channeled his resilience into music. So I just want to welcome you again to the session today. If you can go to the next slide. Which is Native Spirituality, Creating Time and Space for Trauma Recovery and Wellness. And again, I'm Holly Eckelhawk. I'm the Tribal Behavioral Health Lead for the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. We're very happy to have you all here. And we just have a couple of quick slides I want to go through. You can go to the next slide. Just to let you know who the team is with the New England MHTTC, which is the acronym. It's Yale University's Program for Recovery and Community Health. The C4 Innovations Organization, which I am a part of, which is one of my most favorite groups in the country. It's a social advocacy and recovery organization based in the Boston area. Harvard University Department of Psychiatry, and the Center for Educational Improvement. So that is the team of the New England MHTTC. And the next slide. This is just a disclaimer, of course. We're funded by SAMHSA, and you can look at this later. You all will receive the full slide set tomorrow. So let's go to the next slide. And then the New England MHTTC works very hard to be a culturally responsive organization, and there's a very specific intentional outreach to people of color, including Indigenous people. So the next slide. Of course, we want to always acknowledge the indigenous land, and we respectfully acknowledge that we stand on territories where Indigenous nations and tribal groups are traditional stewards of the land. So please join us in supporting efforts to affirm tribal sovereignty, and always, always display respect and gratitude for Indigenous people. We honor and recognize the original peoples of this land in New England and across the country. We understand our healing is interconnected as we work to support and uplift our collective communities. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of today's gathering. We really wanted to do this to honor tribal healthcare providers. We want to acknowledge the loss, the grief, the anxiety that we've all been through in the past 15, 16 months with the pandemic, especially. We want to talk about Native spirituality in the powerful role that Native spirituality can play in recovery and wellness. We're going to share some traditional ways of coping and regaining balance. And we want to experience joy, which every time I see Superman's video, it's so beautiful and so easily put together. That was in the Montana, and they just decided to do it, and the brilliance of Christian Parish and the brilliance is example of the brilliance of all Native people to be able to put that together fairly easily, fairly casually, with one person filming and two people dancing is spectacular. So, but I want to say a little bit more about today and why we wanted to do this. We really wanted to, and I wanted to acknowledge the terrible times that we've all had of late. The pandemic initially hit tribal communities very hard. Many of us, myself included, have lost people to COVID. I lost some of my childhood friends that I grew up with in Pawnee, Oklahoma. And people were stunned and afraid. It stirred up a lot of feelings, the pandemic, and it brought back a lot of memories that are not necessarily good memories for tribal people. One of the things that my tribe did, and many, many other tribes did as well, is when the vaccine was available, our tribe prioritized the first people to get the vaccine in our tribe were our traditional healers, our song keepers, and our language people, because we can't lose those people. And then after that, it was elders and, the kind of the more conventional list, but many tribes prioritized their traditions and did everything they could to protect those people that hold that knowledge. But I think that the feeling of loss and control with the pandemic brought back, I think, for some of us, the feelings of colonization. And it made us, at least some of the people I've talked to, it made us kind of have a bad memory of when Native people believed they had no control, or they had very little control over what was happening. So we wanted to acknowledge that those feelings and that anxiety and that being stunned and afraid, but we also want to recognize that we actually did have control. We do have control right now, and that's because of our DNA as tribal people, as Native people. Our DNA never lets us forget the power of healing in our way of life. Our memories that we have almost always go back to our grandparents, what we watched, what we saw, the ceremonies, the songs. And when you think about our relatives and our ancestors, they had their own way and their own brilliance of how to cope when unusual things were happening. They always pulled into ceremony. They always pulled into dance. They always pulled into food and comfort for each other. So it's in our DNA of how to be resilient, how to cope. But we do recognize it's been incredibly unusual times, especially for our tribal healthcare providers. The work is hard and long on a good day. But when we add the pandemic on top of that, it's been incredibly difficult, and we want to acknowledge and honor our tribal healthcare providers. So today, we're going to spend some time remembering ways to help us regain balance when life circumstances overwhelm our ability to cope, which is a human attribute. There are times when we will be overwhelmed. And I'm thinking about the news about the Olympic athletes who have dropped out of competition with huge pressure on them to compete because something's not right. They're emotionally not on point, and they're going to hurt themselves if they push through that and try to do athleticism that could be dangerous to them. And I'm so applaud by stopping to say, no, I need to take care of myself. And that's what the purpose of this time together today is about. So we have tremendous capacity. When things exceed our current resources and our current ability to cope, we hope today we're going to show you some, remind you of your DNA if you're a Native person, but also remind you of some great perspectives from three of our panelists. So if we can go to the next slide. So we're so privileged to have Jennifer Harding with us today, and she's going to do an opening prayer. Thank you, Jennifer.
I almost forgot to unmute. Manat ka nikonahachik. Katapatanamu wachi wami kyakwasanish. Katapatanamu wachi kisak. Katapatanamu wachi anakwasak. Katapatanamu wachi ahki. Katapatanamu wachi sipuash. Katapatanamu wachi katahanash. Katapatanamu wachi wami awa asak. Katapatanamu wachi wami natongwasak. Ananama anian namanat wipi wanikak. Ananama anian asinat wipi sompwak. Hon.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's really beautiful. So today we have three fabulous panel speakers who are going to share their perspectives on Native spirituality, trauma recovery, and wellness. And that is Chief Malerba from the Mohegan tribe. Jennifer is going to come back, and Mike Duncan from Native Dads Network. And yes, you will get all of these slides. They're going to send everything back out to everyone who's registered tomorrow. So we're going to start with Lynn, and I am so thrilled to have Lynn join us today. And I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then she's going to share her perspective. So Lynn, turn it over to you.
Katatal Tamawish, thank you so much, Holly. And I am Nutiwi Sungsquamatai Mutahash. My name is Chief Many Hearts, Lynn Malerba. And the reason I'm called Many Hearts is near and dear to my name. I had never taken a Mohegan name before. And I am honored that our medicine woman named me. And what she said was, when I became chief, she said, you can't delay any longer. You have to take a Mohegan name and I'm going to help you. And she said, well, you know, you specialized in cardiology and critical care nursing, and you've held many hearts in your hands in the past, and now you hold our hearts in your hands. And I thought, leave it to Melissa, our medicine woman, to give me the perfect name. But before I begin, I just want to say thank you again for inviting me to participate. And I would also like to say thank you to for the prayer. That was really wonderful. Our words, Mohegan words and Wampanoag words are very close. And we are working with Jessie Little Doe Baird to restore our language. And so I'm terrible at memorizing, but I will get there at some point in time. But I really do appreciate the prayer. And so I would just ask you to, so my background is critical care nursing. I was the Health and Human Services Director for our tribe. And it is really special when the people that watched you grow up want to hire you anyway to work with them. That's a little vote of confidence right there. But when we had some economic development on our reservation, our council said, all right, well, it's really time to think about what kinds of programs we want to institute and provide to our people. And so I was really honored to be the Health and Human Services Director. My mom was on the tribal council at the time, and she served for 30 years, 24 or 26 of which were all volunteer. And, you know, and when she retired, then I ran for tribal council because it is our family history and tradition to be in tribal leadership. And now I'm very honored to be the chief of the Mohegan tribe. So I work more on policy issues these days than I do on the day-to-day administration in the tribe, which is fun, but I always have an opinion. And so it's a little, you know, it's a little difficult for me not to have a vote on certain things, but I surely make my opinions known regardless, because that is a sassy Mohegan tradition. I wanted to share with you our vision statement because I think that this really talks a lot about our spirituality. We are all connected. We are all connected from the generations, but we're also all connected to our Mother Earth and to all of nature. And I think when we think about, you know, how we walk together on this world, but also how we walk to honor the ancestors that came before us, and how we also walk on the path. So as I have said in the past, that we leave footprints on the path for those yet to come and for those that we have yet to know, so that they may find their way easily. And that's what our ancestors did for us. So I share this, this slide with you just to kind of ground some of my comments a little bit. But one of the things that I wanted to share the photo, we have the oldest Indian owned and run museum in the United States. And it was started by Gladys Tantaquidgeon, medicine woman at the time, and her dad and her brother. And she had a lot of artifacts for safekeeping from all of our tribal people, as well as throughout her travels in the United States, because she worked with many tribes as one of the first Indian women hired by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to help restore our languages and our cultural practices and our arts and crafts. So she's somebody who's very, very special to us and is an icon in Mohegan. But I shared this particular picture as just a snippet of this museum. It's a very modest stone structure. You can see there's a stone that has a diamond in it, and diamond means good health. It brings good health to us. And throughout the museum, in various parts of the museum, there's this iconography that's built into the museum to remind us about who we are as people. So while we do have intergenerational trauma and while we have experienced very, very difficult times, I would offer that we also have intergenerational resilience. And it's the resilience of our ancestors that allow us to continue on in present day, that allow us to honor who we are as Native people and allow us to reclaim some of what has been taken from us and some of which was smothered, once we experienced the colonization and the immigration of the European people to our shores. And in the East, that we experienced that much earlier. We experienced that in the 1600s. And so our difficulties began earlier than it did, say, in the Midwest and the middle part of the United States, as well as the Western part of the United States. From the 1600s to the 1700s, we lost 90% of our population and 90% of our land base was taken from us. And yet we hung on. And I think that that's a story that's really important to share. And that's a story that's really important for our young people to know, is that despite experiencing very difficult times, our ancestors found a way to ensure that we would survive right up until present day. That is remarkable to me, and it is something that we always have to honor. We were blessed with the oral traditions of our ancestors. We were also blessed with some written historical documents, but you have to remember that a lot of the historical documents were written by our oppressors. They were written by the historians that came to our shores. So they may not have been accurate. It may have been what they chose to interpret for us. So as we think about healing, one of the things that I think is really important to understand is there was a gap in time where our ancestors chose not to teach our language and not to teach our culture and not to teach some of the things that were so important to us, because people were being beaten for speaking their language and they were enforced to be Christianized. And the reason that people want us to be Christianized and educated in the European ways was because that was a way to diminish our culture, to say that we were no longer Indian, and then to be able to take our lands with impunity and to have their way with us and to impose their wishes and will upon us. That was something that was truly an epic battle for our ancestors. So in some regards, our culture was smothered, but in other regards, we're lucky because people held on to it and we still have some of it, but we are reclaiming our spirituality. We are reclaiming our Native spirituality. And I will give you the perfect example of that. Our church and the land our church sits on is very spiritual for us, and it's very important to us as a nation. The land our church sits on was deeded to Mohegan by two Mohegan women, Lucy Tecumseh and her daughter Cynthia Huscott. And the reason they deeded the land to us was because our reservation was shrinking and that was being taken from us. So they deeded the land to Mohegan for as long as a Mohegan would walk on this earth. And that allowed us to still claim that we had a reservation and go through the re-acknowledgement, re-recognition process through the federal government. The church was built by philanthropists in the town next to us to Christianize Mohegan people. And again, that was a way to provide the religion of the oppressors to us. But we used that church for so much more. So it was a place of indigenous spirituality because that's where our tribal members met. That's where our tribal citizens met to choose their leaders, to socialize, to practice our culture. It was our social center, it was our educational center, and it was a spiritual center. And above the altar on the church, despite the fact that it's a congregational church, or was until recently, there's always been an eagle feather hung to remind everyone, both the non-Native community that worshiped in that church and the Native community that worshiped in that church, that they were on indigenous sacred lands. And those lands are called Mohegan Hill because that's where our museum is, that's where our church was, and that's where many of our ancestors grew up, including my great-grandfather, who was the chief, my grandfather, and my mother. And so when you go to Mohegan Hill, we consider that a place of good spirits. And it was a place where I like to say we had a Mohegan resistance. Our Mohegan Sewing Society was there. And it was the ladies that continued to speak the language on the down low, as you would say, that would continue to teach our culture and that would continue to remind us that we were more than just being assimilated into the local community, that we continued to remain as separate people. And indeed, Mohegan actually sued the colony of Connecticut in the courts of London. And in the courts of London in the 1700s, they recognized, they said, Mohegan is a separate people with a separate culture, a separate land base, and a separate polity or separate politics. And they shall live side by side by the people who come to these shores. And we all know that that didn't work quite so well. But even back then, it was recognized that we were unique, we were our own government, we were our own people. So while our church was congregational, there was still this group of women that continued to practice what was so important to us in terms of spirituality. Now we have decided to decolonize the church. And so we actually have asked the congregation to leave. And we now have a church committee that's working with our tribal people to develop how we want to use that space and how we want to reclaim our Native spirituality and what kinds of ceremonies and spiritual practices do we want to reincorporate into our community. And it needs to be community driven. It cannot be driven by leadership. This has got to be something that is driven by our community. That, I think, is very important to us. In addition to that, aspect of our spirituality, and that is perhaps a little bit more formal, ways that we heal are very integrated into the fabric of our society. And that is by gathering together. Whenever we are gathered together and we practice ceremony or we engage in ceremony, it's a way to connect with one another. So whether it's at our wigwam celebrations, which is what we would call our powwow, wigwam means welcome. And so we welcome our relatives back in the summertime to celebrate our traditional ways with us. Or whether it's in individual ceremony, it's a way for us to connect. And as I mentioned today, we have a summer camp and we engage with our youth throughout the year. And what we're trying to remind them is that they are uniquely positioned to celebrate who they are as Mohegan children and Mohegan people. And to remind them that there is no such thing as being not enough Indian, because, everyone is always on the journey of learning. And I think, we've lost a lot in New England, but we've retained a lot in New England. And so it's our job to make sure that we share with our children the space that they occupy as sacred space to us. And that, they are uniquely Native, and it's up to us to encourage them along the way. So whether it's engaging with smudging ceremonies, whether it's dancing and drumming, and all of the research will tell you that children that connect with their culture have that basic cultural protection built in, so that their mental health is being protected as they engage in those practices with us. And it's our way to hold on to them and make sure that they're embraced by the whole community, not just their individual families, that they are part of something bigger than themselves. And so we're really proud of the work that we're doing with our children, but we're also proud of our elders and the work that they do with our children, because they engage with them very informally, as they did with me growing up. And it is that informal interaction that I think really makes a difference in the mental health, not only of our elders, but also of our children. So whether they're teaching basket making or working in our community garden, when we're connecting to Mother Earth in our community garden, that's a form of prayer and that's a form of spirituality. And we're sharing the vegetables from our community garden with our community members. And when we share, we are offering something of ourselves because we've offered, some of our work and our spirit into the vegetables that we're producing. And so I think all of those kinds of community activities are what strengthen us as a community, what helps us when maybe we're struggling a little bit. And in Mohegan, you'll see the Trail of Life, which is, kind of this kind of curvy line. It represents New England because we live in a very hilly environment, but it also represents the ups and downs of life, right? The curvy line, but you see dots all along the line. And it's the dots that represent the people in our community that help us when we're at the lows, but also cheer us on when we're at our highs. And so all of the symbolism in Mohegan help us think about who we are and what our place is on this earth and how we are just uniquely positioned to help someone else along that path of life and lend them a hand when they're needing a little bit more encouragement. I think,
Right.
and I know my time is probably almost up, but one of the very interesting cultural practices that we had was there were no DCF, there were no child protective services back in the day. If a family was struggling, and they were struggling with their children, another family would take in that child until that family figured out what it was that, was preventing them from being, effective parents. So I think the more we engage as a community and the more we help each other personally, the stronger our community is. And helping one another is the most basic form of spirituality. And so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Lynn. That was really fascinating and a great example of, like I say, the DNA of tribal people is incredibly powerful. You also remind me that when we have moments of duress or feeling overwhelmed, you can mentally think about that and all of that and be quiet and, kind of understand that. But to really recover, it almost always requires doing something, being physically active, doing a garden, doing, it's a combination of all that. So thank you. You made those points beautifully. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to the next slide, which is my friend Jennifer Harding, Healing Waters. I'm so happy that Jennifer and I have met and worked together for the past couple of years, maybe 2 years. And I'll let Jennifer introduce herself. And she has really done a lot of work in language reclamation. So Jennifer.
Good afternoon. Waniki Sak, Natasawi is Jennifer, Nipawi Napiash, Nutoma Sikwana Makwapakwa. My name is Healing Waters, as Holly mentioned, and Jennifer Harding. And I'm from the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Let's see. So I've been a council member for the Herring Pond tribe for about 12 or 13 years. Most recently, I've taken on a few different roles in the tribe, one being the tribal health and wellness and prevention nurse. I'm also a youth educator for the children, which is one of my favorite things because kids are fun and I have some. So another is I've recently became the tribal administrator assistant, which is all the nitty-gritty background stuff. And that's actually really great. I love doing this work. I'll get into that after, but yes, as it says here, I also homeschool my daughters, and we have a farm here. So we have a bunch of cows, pigs, chickens, dogs. So on top of all that, I am pretty busy, which is great. It keeps me going. So let's see, I wanted to start out and say, as everybody has mentioned that, this year has been year and change now has been really hard on not just everyone individually, but as a whole. The community, our community we've lost a lot of people this year. And it's, as a small community, there's like about 350 tribal members of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. You know, just losing a handful of some elders and some youth. And being so separated, because, you know, as a community, we're always coming together to have socials or just gatherings or family, everything. So, and funerals, of course, ceremonies, and not being able to do that over the past year and a couple months has been really hard on the community. We've all been, you know, kind of isolated from each other and separated. And it's been really tough for a lot of tribal members. So I'm really embracing the part of being the tribal administrator where I can, and just being me also, reach out and connect to people and see what they need and see where I can help. And again, that's not just in my role, but you know, also just me. I mean, the medicine man named me Healing Waters for a reason. And I was so excited when he named me that, because I love both of those things. As a nurse, I was like, yeah, this fits so perfectly. But so being in that role specifically, though, has helped me to reach out more and gather more info to try to get everyone back together. It's been so hard. But what I wanted to talk about a few things that are helping us heal as a community. One is the language. So I worked for the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project for about 10 years. I was involved for about 14. I've been involved for about 14 years, but actually working for the WLRP for 10 as a linguist, also a community teacher. I helped build the Weedamoo School that's now in Mashpee. And, you know, helped with all of the programming there, the summer camps and everything. And so, you know, when I first started there, I was pregnant, or I had just had my first daughter, and my goal was like, this kid is going to come out speaking the language that I never had the privilege of learning, because, you know, for my grandfather, who just recently passed, who was 93, when he was a kid, it was like embarrassing to be a Native person. He used to tell me stories all the time that he would get picked on. And there was a point where, you know, tribal people in our area actually did not say they were Native. My grandfather used to tell people he was Black, which, you know, the fact that it was better, and of course, you know, I'm not saying it's bad at all, but the fact that it was better to say you were Black in the 1940s over Native American is like, wow. It was just, it always boggled my mind. And to not know his tradition, and I didn't grow up that way because it wasn't something that was talked about in our area, really. There was, you know, people did stuff in the background, you know, they gardened traditionally, they foraged, you know, they hunted, but it wasn't something really spoken about. And the language, my grandfather didn't know anything about the Wampanoag language. He doesn't remember even hearing that as a child. And so when I, you know, was offered this opportunity, I was like, I was just like, of course, this is my path. And so, and not just for me, but to teach my daughter and future generations, but also to be able to bring that back to my community. I mean, I was so proud, and I'm still so proud of the fact that I'm one of a handful of Wampanoag speakers that are fluent in the language here, and I can provide that to the community. It's just, it's still, even after all this time, like mind-boggling to me that I am speaking this language that was forbidden for so long, and that I can finally speak the way my ancestors did, and share that with the community. And I wanted to mention that, Holly, you had mentioned about, we have this DNA in us as Native people, right? And I was thinking about, in the Wampanoag language, there's this little letter, it's called an inalienable M. And this letter really means so much. What happens is, if you put it at the end of certain words, that word takes on a whole new meaning. So there's two that I have in mind. One is ahki, which means land, and one is napi, which means water. And I can say, oh, this is my land, this is my water, right? Just like we would in English. But if I add that M to the back of that word, so if I say natakim or nanapim, that literally means this dirt, this water is literally a part of my body. Like, we are the same, we have the same molecules, the same energy. It's just like, when I first found out about this inalienable M, I was just like, holy smokes, because when you think about the way our ancestors thought about words and about meanings of things, it's so different than how we think about or meanings of words now. I mean, we don't say, oh, this land is a part of me, but our ancestors knew that they literally were made of the same stuff as the land that they were living and growing and eating from. And it's just like, this little letter changed my whole perspective on thinking and language, and even just learning about the way our ancestors thought about, in their minds, how different they do now. It's just, I want more people in the community, and a lot of people do know, but I need to continue bringing this to the community, because I feel like once they know about these little things and how our ancestors thought about such sacred items, I mean, water, I really think that's like so healing and inspire. I just feel like it's so inspiring to even know about the way your ancestors thought about. As you can tell, I really love this inalienable M, but it just has so much meaning. And like you said, we're just part of this whole thing here. So another thing that we've been working on is our cemeteries. So we have some cemeteries around, of course, that are old. We don't even know where some of the headstones are or the graves are, but they're, of course, respected. We smudge, we do all the things there. But recently we got some land back from the town of Plymouth, and on it is a burial ground. And recently we went, some tribal members, some youth, there were some elders there, to clean up around there. It hadn't been cleaned in years. And this was right before the pandemic, or right at the very beginning, I believe. And I think it was just so healing for not only the people that were there, but the ancestors that were there to, be found again, I feel like, because for a long time, nobody was there. Nobody was taking care of it. And we actually are learning how to clean the headstones in the proper way. And hopefully soon we'll be able to I'm not sure if we're going to, but maybe see if there's other graves around. But I feel like, that's another healing thing, is that we're healing all of these people that kind of had forgotten about this space. And, those people that are buried there, I just feel like they've kind of come back to life now because, these community tribal members have come together to clean up and take care of this land again. That is, Netakim, right? This is our land. And to circle back to that, in September, actually, we're going to have hopefully a really large amount of tribal members come and do a healing ceremony there. And not only to honor the ancestors there, but just to hopefully get everybody back together, and back into the same sort of mindset, because people have been so displaced and so isolated, that I hope this can really be a new beginning for the tribal members that come, to continue their healing process, which I feel like is going to take a long time for some people after all of this.
Melissa, Jennifer, that was so fascinating and moving. And I'm so glad. Thank you for talking about language. That particular, what was that word again? That
There was two. I said Aki.
mhm,
Aki is land, and
mhm,
Naki is
right.
water. So Natakim, Nanapim. Yeah.
And that symbol at the end is called what?
It's an inalienable M.
Inalienable in. That's fascinating. Thank you so much. You gave some very good examples of how healing can occur in many different ways. And reclamation in itself is a very huge healing, kind of settling into who we are. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Tapatash.
You all will get a chance to meet my friend and colleague, Mike Duncan. And Mike, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself. And thank you so much for joining us today, Mike.
Well, for us over here, I'm on the West Coast, so it's morning, so good morning or good afternoon. Liok Banao is how we say here, as far as I'm currently living in Putwin territory, which is one of my tribes, which is listed as Wintun. But I'm an enrolled member. First, I'll just start off and say I'm happy to be here to share just a little bit. I know that when I said about I got like a 15-minute window, I go, oh geez, that's it's a lot of information for just a little bit of time. But it's good to at least have an opportunity to share a little bit about our culture and about the things that we're doing here in what we call California now. I'm an enrolled member of the Round Valley Indian tribes. That's not our tribal territory. We were forced in that location through the U.S. government when then the gold rush came and they were taking our territory here, John Sutter and crew. And so we were pushed into Yuki territory. There's 7 tribes on our reservation, on our reserve. It's one of the first established reservations here, what they call California today. It's Hoopa Reservation, Round Valley Indian Reservation, and Yokut Tule River Reservation. So we were our reservation, and that's I'm not saying to be proud of, far from it, but just giving a little history of where our people come from. Our first contact with with outsiders was the Russians and the Vikings. They came in the early 1500s and taking Pomo women from the coast. And so that's my father's tribe is we're Maidus. Her mother's a Maidu and Wailaki, and his father was Wintun, his Putwin, and then my mother is Western Band Shoshone out of Nevada, scattered band. And so I am I'm happy to be here. I'm also the executive director of Native Dads Network, and we're a program that works in various tribal communities and reservations and rancherias in the area to help our communities heal using cultural, I use some clinical terms like cultural modalities, but just really returning to like who we were originally were. A lot of our ceremonies here, me and my children are our ceremonial dancers. We're shake head dancers, and we're also big head dancers. And it is something that, that we've been practicing that wasn't at least in our family, was not part of I grew up as, because again, what we talked about is colonization, church, emissions, like everything was wiped out over here. A lot of it was wiped out. So a lot of our ceremonies were hidden, and they're still hidden today. Like there's not like a flyer, there's nothing like a web page or anything that way. There's still, it's kind of like an invite, or if you hear it through the Indian grapevine, then that means that's your invite. And so one of the things that I've, on this journey of I'm gonna share this. I think I've heard a lot of great things, and I just want to repeat a lot of the same things that these two brilliant ladies shared. But one of our beliefs, or this is our belief, is that, that we're prayed to be here. We're prayed to be here. It's like generations before we actually get here. Like someone calls our spirit, to get here. And so when our spirit finally gets here and we then become human, it's our job here to live here on earth, to live spiritually, to really build our spirit up, to get ourselves ready to return home. And so a lot of times with our people, because of addiction and mental health, or just, again, there's a list of, things that we were disconnected from, that, we're always trying to reclaim and refine our spirit and try to rebuild our spirit. And so, like, it's very different, when we talk about religious or religion, when we call God he, or even put God into a human form. It's something that, for me, I just really can't wrap my head around, and some of those thoughts, and where I got those kind of thoughts, and it got to a deeper level through my prayer, through our ceremonies, is understood, like, like John Trudell's always rings a bell, and it's always kind of, he said, I can't see God in a human form. It limits us. And what was said earlier is that it's in all things. It's in those trees, that we're no better, no worse than that tree out there. We're no better, no worse than that animal that flies, the one that walks the ground, the one that swims in the water. Like no better than that water. We're no better than anything, that bush, that tree. We're no better than that dirt, that ground that we stand on. We're no better than anything on here on Mother Earth, because we're created by one thing. We're created by the same creator. And so when I started to because I was, like ownership, and that's just about colonization or a belief system. We start to believe that we own things. We think that there's some kind of pride in that. And that separates us from who we really are and what was mentioned. And then I'm glad that the lady just mentioned it right now. We have a saying here, is that this land owns us. This land knows us. So when we sit here on our territory, we sing these songs that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation, is that this land knows those songs already. These songs come from the land. They come from the animals. They come from the air, the wind. They come from Creator. All things are Creator. And so, like, the things that because logging is big here too, and I live in Northern California. I get sad when I see logging, when those trees are being murdered. I get mad when I see creeks and rivers dried up, because that water is a relative of mine. Because again, I'm connected to that land. My ancestors, right here, fished, hunted in this area. so those things that, that when we start to make relationship with earth, and that's why, I want to just again to give prayers to the tribe or the people up there at Red Lake right now. They're fighting, the water protectors up there. They're fighting for land, fighting for the water. And it's nothing more than just saying that we are connected to this water. That's it. And so the spirituality, like there's a lot of times that when we because we use like an elderberry, like I'll share a song a little bit later, but this elderberry stick, and a lot of times people it's what we used to sing with, right? And there's people that will ask me to do workshops for young ones, and I sometimes I don't normally do them unless the whole process is kind of done, is meaning like that we go gather the material, that I teach this young one what time of year to harvest this plant and to give thanks, to make offerings. Like there's a relationship with this area where I gather, right? And then when I come back, that I allow it to take its natural course, allow it to cure. And then when it comes to the point where it's completely cured, then I'm able to pray with it and sing with it and make a relationship with this. And this becomes like a spiritual tool, but it only becomes spiritual by the way that I take care of it. Right. And so how I take care of it is, again, that I always wrap it in a cloth. I wrap it in something where it's protected from outside things, because what I'm using this for is to call in spirits. I'm using this for to ask Creator to help us into whatever we're going through. Right. And so the things that whether it's a drum or whether it's the feathers you gather or whatever those things are, that, I've been blessed in the area that I live, like there's hawks, like that's one of our main birds that we use. I don't hunt hawks, I sometimes roadkill, sometimes I find them on the side of the road, or so I find them and I'll go walk under my and I'll find feathers or I find birds and I pluck them and I bury them. I offer, I sing to thank them for sacrificing their lives. And that's how we use the feathers for our regalia here. And it's something that, again, it's something I've been teaching my children about, making relationships with all things like the land and the animals, and using these resources, using these resources in the right way, and getting away from sometimes. And I want to share this to be careful of not colonizing the culture. Like, because what we do sometimes, and like somebody mentioned too about the oral traditions, this is how I learned, is not by going in a book or going, and those are important. I mean, it's a good way to get information if you don't have it, but a lot of times it's sitting with those elders, or sitting with the person that knows how to make regalia, like spending time, not just a day, sometimes weeks. It takes me, sometimes I'll sit with one of my brothers. I'll sit like 2-3 days, and the first day we'll just talk before we even start working on anything. A lot of times we're in a rush. We want to do these things right away. And what I'm trying to share is that, we live in a fast time. We live in a different time, and our old ones, our old people didn't live that way. They were patient with things. They seen the power of all things. You know what I mean? And they made they took what they only needed. And there's some people that were more spiritually powerful than others, that had a stronger connection to Creator than others. Not to say they didn't have a connection, but they just had a stronger Creator talk to that person, chose that person. And what I'm seeing today is that there's a lot of young ones that have that medicine, I've been chosen by Creator, that I've seen in our ceremonies, that I'm like, I'm just blown away. Like they're already in that singing, or they're already dancing, and that have that. And what we're being taught today, because a lot of times the old tradition was that the young ones couldn't be in these certain ceremonies because of their age, and then they weren't they were still, their spirit was still young in that way, that they were ready to encounter the other dark spirit. But what we're seeing is that, and one of our people here is, our spiritual people here said that's what Creator's telling us to use, that medicine of the young ones. The young ones are going to start teaching the older ones how to walk. You know what I mean? Because of the things that have been lost. And so we've been told to pay attention to the young ones and to nurture the young ones and to invite the young ones in to do this work with us. And so I've been experiencing young ones dreaming songs, dreaming dances, and sharing those with, with our leaders, and those dances and those songs being sung in ceremony and done in ceremony. And they're pretty powerful. And so, today is a beautiful day. And again, I don't know how much time I have left. I could go on and on if you let me, but it's a beautiful day to share a little bit of medicine with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. That was really powerful, what you had to say. And we have one, if you go to that next slide, I wanted just to give a pitch again to Native Dads Network, which is what Mike founded and serves as a CEO. And I think I'm a big fan of Native Dads Network because it is a male-initiated gathering of Native men. And we can't have enough of those kinds of organizations. And I ran across this picture. It happens to be Christian Parrish, who was the opening song and video for us, holding up a Native Dads Network t-shirt. And I was really happy to find that. But Mike, I think what you said is incredibly powerful. And if we can go to the next slide, I just want to kind of reiterate some of the things that we heard from our three panelists. Lynn, well, and everybody, I think that one of the themes was, and it's a real, it's an important lesson about coping when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling crushed, by the weight of responsibility and the concerns of in your community and the pandemic. We're all connected. I think that's a common theme we kept hearing, is that we're all connected as Native people. And I really like what Lynn also said about safekeeping. She told the story about safekeeping of the Mohegan history, but she also talked about safekeeping of you, of everyone that's on the call. You are precious cargo, and we all want to keep you safe as well. Jennifer was, that native language conversation was incredibly powerful, Jennifer. And I think the other thing you talked about that really struck me was when you were talking about the cemetery, you used the phrase tending to space. And I think that's a really important phrase, tending to space, tending to our native spaces, tending to our native land, tending to each other. And then Mike, your comments about we were prayed to be here, and that spirituality is in all things, and especially that the land knows us. So if we can make a relationship to Earth, that is such a soothing coping mechanism. So I really appreciate it. And I know several people have to leave, but we're going to have the honor of, if you can go to the next slide, is Mike agreed to gift us and gift you all, every one of you that are listening today, with the song. And we're going to let Mike do that right now.
So this is a healing song, and then and that's going to put one song. I just want to share that, and then I know that everyone prays in their own way and to who they pray to. I know that Creator sees all things, and our intent. A lot of times, we're not. I was told years back not to do these things recorded or anything of that nature, but things change as well, and our people gave me permission to sing some songs, because these are ceremonial songs, and that we understand that it's an intent, and that this medicine needs to be shared and let people know that we're still here, we're still not just existing, we're thriving, and we're still pushing, forward, to do that work with our people. And so I just wanted to share that first before I share the song. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that blessing of that healing song. It's always powerful. There's nothing more equally powerful, I guess, of recognizing Mother Earth and touching the land as a way to, recenter ourselves and rebalance, as well as song. So thank you so much. So we're just about to wrap up here. So we just have a couple of slides of information I want to show you all. We included some resources for you for today. One is the link to the video, the music video that we opened with, which was Christian Parish's song called Why. And you can go to click on that link and it will take you to the video. You can share it with other folks. There's the website for Native Dads Network. Terry Cross, most people know, the founder and now senior advisor of National Indian Child Welfare Association, did a podcast, which is really interesting on intentional resilience. He talks about our DNA and that we have resilience in us. And in times of duress, how you can kind of intentionally pull that piece of resilience to the forefront and use it to help you cope. And there's the link for that. Our good friends at Wellbriety, of course, are always a great resource if you haven't seen their website. Native Wellness Institute, fabulous resource for ways to rebalance yourself. And then also we just wanted to list the Native American Music Awards link. every time we have these discussions, every time we do one of these, and if you can go to the next slide, Vanessa, we're always going to have music. So we're going to continue this for the next 3 months. So the last Thursday of every month during the noon hour on the East Coast, we are going to continue this discussion. We'll always show a different tribal music video for you. We'll always have song, and we really appreciate you all joining us today, and we hope you found the information helpful. One more slide, I believe. Questions. So if you have any questions, you can always put things in the chat right now at the end. You can send me an email. You can call me directly. But again, I'm Holly Echohawk, and we're really so happy to have you with us today. So if anybody has any questions they want to put on the chat, we'll just take a minute to look at that, and then we will close out. This session today was scheduled for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Our subsequent ones next month, the next 3 months will only be 1 hour, just that 1 hour during the lunch. Because I know some people had to leave early at the top of the hour. So thank you for all of the comments. People are really pleased with the information. Thank you, Kevin. He said it was enlightening, especially in the days of late. No kidding about that, really. Laura, thank you for saying that you appreciate the awesome presentation. I'm grateful that you're able to attend. Lots of notes of gratitude, which is what we wanted. We just wanted to honor you all, recognize what you have been through, recognize the loss, the fear sometimes, the anxiety that we've all experienced, and give you some experiences in this past hour and 15 minutes of how to rebalance yourself, realize that we're all here for you, realize that we're all one, and really looking forward to seeing you next month. And you will receive an invitation for the next month and the subsequent few months. Tomorrow, you will receive the link to the recording. So if you had to leave early, or if someone else in your group wasn't able to attend, you can see the whole presentation again. You will receive the PowerPoint, and you will receive, there is a little bios of the speakers. So you'll receive all of that tomorrow from Vanessa. And thank you, Vanessa, for being behind the scenes and helping us so much. So with that, I think we can go ahead and say goodbye. You all have a good day. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.